And so then, Christianity is distinguished from every other religion on the face of this earth because it's not man reaching up to God, it's God reaching down to man.
All right, ready to rock. Rock your world with a flood of truth. Hopefully Dario will be able to keep up with all the weird words, technical terms about to arrive. But for those of you that haven't gotten my full name and everything in the last several months that we've been attending here, which has been such a privilege and an honor just to be able to be a part of this family when we can, but also to be able to share this, especially in the last, what's happened in the last 5 years. It's literally been a flood of changes and upheavals, but as Dario's setting off and his wife Lupita and family with new beginnings, this actually marks a major new beginning for me. 5 years ago today was when I was severely impacted by the deadliest scorpion in North America on my property. And that was the end of my old life. No longer a foolish Laodicean. And June 8th was the beginning of a whole new life also. Sorry for choking up so much. I feel just like Dario, so emotional. And this is a culmination that I never would have imagined being able to be here in front of you all and sharing this. So thank you, Joel and Jason, for wanting to include this. And the parallels in our Nehemiah devotion are just so profound. Such a profound day for Dario's family, and as we say farewell for briefly, but also in what not only I've been walking through and my family's been walking through, but then what we're about to share here, what we are all walking amongst in this El Paso area. We are literally surrounded by God's truth and manifestations of his word in the form of rocks. These rocks may seem kind of meaningless and empty, but if you're struggling in your faith walk of, I need solid proof, because you feel like, oh, I'm just not getting any signs. I'm not getting that tangible evidence. Well, guess what? It's all around us. It's in this building. It's outside. It's in the mountains, as I'll be showing you. It's everywhere. So when you feel that kind of maybe a disconnect or a struggle, all you got to do is look at his creation. Because if you can't recognize the creation, how are you going to recognize the creator? And so that's what's the profound foundations of all of this. And so it took the first 25 years of my life to come out of atheism. The deeper I got into the science world, the geology world, the more I started seeing the cracks. But then I fell into the Laodicean, the lukewarm world. Now, Revelation 2 warns us, Jesus tells us, if you're lukewarm, you either better be all hot or all cold. If you're in between, he's going to spit you out. And that's where I was for over 20 years. So it took the deadliest scorpion in North America to break me and shift me so that I could even just come up here and share with you. But I had to be in the Word for at least 3 solid years straight just to have the foundations of this. So he combined the rocks, my training, my blindness of the rocks initially to the Word. And this is what you're going to get to see today. So rocks of revelation, as I alluded to just earlier, holy manifestations. Let me get my glasses on so I don't misread something. The Word became flesh. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1:1. When I'm out and encountering anyone, just random encounters, and it happens to me all the time, gas stations, elevators, Walgreens, grocery stores, anywhere, even in the middle of the forest, I run into people. If I get a chance to really start to steer them towards Jesus, John 1:1 is usually one of the first starting places I tell them to go to. And so, if you think about this image, the ephod breastplate, Exodus 28:17, I'll try to read it for you in case you can't, just a little bit. And thou shalt set in the settings of stones, even 4 rows of stones. And then it lists all the different stones. If you can't see some of them, we got sardius, topaz, of course, the most familiar one, diamond over on slot number 6. Okay, agate, a variety. So if you don't think the rocks, which actually these are the minerals that compose the rocks. So minerals are the ingredients of rocks, just like the sugar and stuff for your cookies. Okay, those are the ingredients. Well, there is a holy purpose to this. So if the priest had to wear that breastplate, then everything stems off the minerals which compose the rocks. These are our foundations, essential foundations of all matter, everything physical, everything you're sitting on and surrounded by right now is dependent on the rocks, just in that. And of course, critical for all organic functions, nutrients, key nutrients. Especially when it's hot this time of year, you better be getting a fair amount of salt, aka electrolytes, or your nerves are going to be all haywire, going to misfire like an engine that's dropping cylinders. Okay, that's the correlation right there, because we are man formed from the dust. And of course, all of our energy and structural resources, we are in a modern world where we become so dependent to where it's hard to even let go of these things. Okay? How many of you take about 3 hours and ignore this for 3 hours straight in a day? It's a little challenging nowadays. So, if you don't think rocks matter, they're everything. It all matters. And when we think of the creation, and I had a real struggle with this for many years, coming from the secular perspective, to be broken from this. Now, it's plain as day. It's like slap me in the face, obvious. And when we think of day 1, day and night, okay? Let there be light. But if you dissect Genesis, the scriptures, every single day has a day and night, okay? It's not endless hours. He makes it real clear, and we'll see in the sequence here why that matters. So first we have the firmament in the midst of the waters. Well, that's our atmospheric restraints, right? If we had no atmosphere, you wouldn't be able to contain the oxygen for you to single breath. Every breath you take, okay? So you got to have that set first, and then the grass, the herbs, and the fruit tree. Well, those are necessary to set the stage for what's coming next. Oh, but wait, sun, moon, and stars, day 4. Now, this is where I used to use the scripture to disprove the Bible. I used to say, well, there was no sun until day 4, so how could it be 24-hour days? It could have been millions of years. Oh, no, but the scripture specifically says, as it says in day 1, day and night, okay? And now, think about this. If you have grass, herbs, and fruit tree, okay, that sun had to be made real quickly, provided. Even though the light was being provided, the sun is our photosynthetic source. All those plants needed that energy source to photosynthesize. And think about how profound it is that plants create their own energy just from the light. Don't you wish we could do that? Just go lay out in the sun. You don't have to eat. You just lay out in the sun and fuel up like a battery. Just like an electric car. Plants are very unique and very special from photosynthetic. But think about this on day 5, winged creatures and water creatures. Well, what are the winged creatures going to eat? Well, they need seeds and grass and fruits. So they had to have all that set for them at just the right time on day 5. And then the arrival of the beast and man. Well, man needs to have plenty to eat. Got to have all the grass. And then the animals. If you notice, you start seeing the pattern. Everything is ordered in a sequence of necessity. Everything created then fulfills. Okay. Can you all hear me okay? A little bit louder? So, it's not until the 7th day, it's like, it's all good. So this is where recognizing the creation, and I used to argue that, oh no, it can still be millions of years. A day to God is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like, I'm sorry, did I get that backwards? 1,000 years to man is like a day to God. But then it goes back both ways. When you really get into the scripture, and Jason on Wednesday was pointing out how we can take little individual scriptures and distort it when we don't have the full context. And I used to do that, not realizing what I was doing when I was in that lukewarm stage, the Laodicean. And so we have to recognize the creation first before we can even fully trust in the Creator. And the secular science wants to throw us off by saying millions and billions of years, and I was a sucker, I was a fool for all that. And that everything is self-created. Well, you know what my question to that is, and you know how many times I've had this encounter with someone, is how did this create itself? And they're like, no, it can't. It was designed. It was engineered. Exactly. If a simple cell phone, relatively speaking, because this cell phone is way simpler than our own bodies, much less plants, if it can't create itself, how did all life create itself? And then they claim everything evolves by natural selection. If you're familiar with one of the early sources of that, Mr. Darwin. Of course, nowadays you can be given a Darwin Award, but that's a whole different meaning of testing your wisdom skills. But what's ironic is, and I just learned this in the last 2.5 years, on a genetic level, evolution is basically impossible, because evolution requires you to increase your genetic information. But natural selection, the very mechanism that they claim drives evolution, requires losing genetic information. So how can one be going one direction, up, increasing information, and the other one's the exact opposite? And it's never been observed. They try to make it look like it's been observed, and you can see with the evolutionary tree that I threw up there. No, I was actually forced to teach a contradiction to evolution at the college level because they couldn't explain all this sudden appearance of all these organisms in the fossil record, because it defied the very evolutionary tree they relied on. It's called punctuated equilibrium. And so that's when I started realizing, this is a huge contradiction. Once you start realizing contradictions and assumptions, that's where you test everything. What are the assumptions? And look for the contradictions. And then that's when everything starts to fall apart. The Bible is so different. Once you fully grasp the Bible in full context, you realize there are no contradictions. People try to make contradictions out of it, but there are none. And that's why Colossians 2:8 says, "See to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy, which depends on human tradition and the elemental spiritual forces of this world rather than on Christ. And that's a parallel to Matthew 24, where he says, do not let yourself be deceived. And so those are the perspectives we need to watch out for. And I always say the devil gives us what we want. Doesn't give us what we need. Only Jesus can give us what we need. So the devil gives us all the ice cream and the candy we could ever ask for. Everything that's appealing. And that's what they do with evolution. Now, you may think El Paso's not so special, but it's actually very, very special. And it correlates directly with the Grand Canyon, Palo Duro Canyon, and beyond. We're flood brothers. And if you can notice here, notice these layers. They're all basically flat. Just like these Bibles that are laying, you can see the pages in the book laying flat. Okay, that's the significance that I'll get into. Here's Palo Duro Canyon. Elle and I were just there in November for the first time. It's one of the few places I hadn't been that I kept driving near but not going to because it's in the Panhandle, and most stuff in the Panhandle is not very geologically enticing except for Palo Duro Canyon. And it turns out Grand Canyon in northern Arizona and Palo Duro Canyon and El Paso are all part of the same continental scale sedimentary flood deposits. Sandstone, limestone. And it's the significance is the flatness. If everything was even over 10,000 years old, you wouldn't see any of these flat layers. But they try to deceive us by telling, oh, it was an inland ocean and it slowly built up. Well, you can't get this setting in an inland ocean. Only on the edges of an ocean can you actually get layers. The edge, not in the middle. There's no deposition going on in the middle of the ocean. If you look at the Gulf of Mexico, or now Gulf of America, and you look where the Mississippi Delta comes in, all the dirt and stuff just goes a little ways. None of it goes into the heart of the Gulf of Mexico, or America, however you want to look at it. So, my main focus to get you all to understand today is that you live in one of the best rock revelation zones in North America. Because the problem with the Grand Canyon is it's really hard to get down in it. And Elle and I floated it for 7 days in August, and it was an amazing experience, but access is really difficult. And then when you're on the rim, you only get to see limited perspectives of it. You don't get the full scale of it. Where here, we can literally, we were just driving in on Montana, coming here for service today, and the light angle was so perfect. It was like looking at a book laid out for me, because I know all the different layers as you're going to learn. And I was like, wow, what a great angle. His proof of his creation, his fingerprints of truth, but learning how to translate it. So the rocks speak a language. I'm just here to help translate that for you so that you can literally see his truth that's founded. As I have up here, the Bible is the foundation. The Word is the foundation, just like John 1:1 I just read. The rocks are a manifestation of his Word. When you learn to read the rocks, and I'll put this back over. This is like a model of the Franklin Mountains, which I'll point out to here as we get to it. They seem so insignificant. Oh, they're just rocks. They're just dumb rocks, right? So if anyone accuses me of having rocks for brains, that's a compliment, by the way. Come join my side. You can turn every insult into a compliment. So speaking of the Franklin Mountains, this is the key thing to recognize. The lower half. Now, right here, I know the color may be a little hard to see, but this lower half right here is kind of a reddish tint. That's this rock right here called Red Bluff Granite. Okay? All right? Give everyone a smile, a nice smile, don't take it for granted. If you can catch that one. Nice is spelled G-N-I-S-S. G-N-E-I-S-S. Getting sloppy in my spelling. This lower half is the creation rock. Then there's a line right here where my arm is. Since I couldn't find my laser pointer, I have to use my arms. That is what's called the Great Unconformity. Huge significance, and we have that exposed here. Amazing, but also you see it in the Grand Canyon, which all the creation scientists, that's their goal, is to go to the Grand Canyon and see it, but yet it's hard to get to it. You have to go way down at the bottom. You got to pay a lot of money like we had to do for the river trip, which was amazing and discomforting all at the same time. Wait a second, El Paso, look, you can just go right here. When they reopen the tram soon, because I used to do that. I used to lead trips up the tramway, which is right there. They're reviving it. And you can literally go touch the Great Unconformity. And what's so profound of it is it's a flat line of separation. But here's the funny thing. The secular science world claims it's missing time of 550 million years old. Supposedly, from their dating techniques, for those of you that have taken my class, what happens when you date a rock? It's a very rocky relationship. That's why you date your relatives. Because when we date our relatives, the relative age of the red buff granite is older than the stuff on top. That's why you date your relatives. But you can't get the absolute age. Actually, the Bible is the only thing that gives us an absolute age. And so, the fact that they want to tell us that this red bluff granite is 1.1 billion years old, and then this dark layer of sandstone called the Bliss sandstone, which is really hard to see on there, is 550 million years old. So if you do the math, 1.1 billion minus 550 is a very special number that we just saw. I'll test your math skills on the fly. So all the top half of the Franklins is sandstone, limestone, oceanic. By the way, that's why I had this mic. So this is a big chunk of limestone. This is some mixture of limestone there. But here in my Franklin's model here, this is the upper half of the Franklins, and these are the lower half. This is, by the way, this rock and that rock are exactly the same rock by actual ingredients, what we call composition, but this got puked out onto the surface, aka lava, like my shirt. Because you lava my shirt? I love it. This is granite that made it to the surface and cooled off real rapidly, okay, called rhyolite. And so how quickly it cools determines what we call texture, the color and everything. That's why you don't trust the color of rocks. You got to break them in half and really analyze them to get their true colors on that. So this rock here is our limestone, dominantly limestone. And I have this actually tilted because the Franklin Mountains here in this picture are tilted towards the west. Here's the west side, and this is the Waco Basin here, Mesilla, and then Waco. It's actually tilted into the screen about 25 degrees, and that's because we've actually measured it in students. So we get to wander out. So what's amazing about geology, because I was a squirrel brain ADD freak, was I could be active, wandering around, and use my brain at the same time. It wasn't just mindless activity. And so I got to grow my brain muscle and my body muscles simultaneously. Now, the other half, the Sierra de Juarez Mountains. How many of you spend much time over in Mexico? Got to go over there with Jorge and Ella for the first time in several years. But I used to sneak over there with some of my friends, and we would go mountain biking in the Sierra de Juarez. And had a friend of mine break his shoulder messed up. We had all kinds of wild stories out there. So, never a dull moment over there. Well, those are also Noah's flood rock. Consisted of limestone, shale, and sandstone. Shale is very special to us, as we'll find out more later, but all oceanic. Well, if we're living on a continent, how do we have all this oceanic rock? How do you get an ocean on a continent? Well, the secular world likes to claim that sea levels rise and fall, but they'd have to stay there, and it's a slow process. It takes decades from their perspective, or from this perspective, it can take minutes to hours to days. And so what's special, if you can't see it yet, I'm gonna outline it, but look for the smashed taco folded rock in this picture, if you can see it while I get ready to change it. It like slaps me in the face, obvious for me, but that's the trained eye. So judgment, the worldwide flood. Let me read the scripture for you. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. The Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. So the Lord said, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race I have created, and with them the animals, the birds, and the creatures that move along the ground, for I regret that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Genesis 6. So catastrophic worldwide flood to cleanse all sin. Human and non-human destruction. But here's a caveat. And I'm going to go a little bit on, for those of you who haven't gotten in detail in Genesis 6, Nephilim giants specifically addressed in the Bible. Hybrid beings, profound physical stature, men of renown, that's what they're titled. But the humans and animals are much more fragile, easily destroyed with less catastrophe. Actually, what's actually about to happen again this summer in Ruidoso, since the fire 2 years ago, the animals and the people are easily impacted by much smaller scale flooding. And just being up there right now, if you're there at the wrong time during the rainy season, Ella and I got trapped over there for a few hours last summer. People were being washed down the main highway in their cars. It doesn't take much to take us out. So why would we need such a worldwide catastrophic scale of destruction? Because we had some very resilient beings, the Nephilim. And that's a whole other side story, but just keep that in the back of your mind. Helps you understand why the degree of catastrophe was necessary. And this is how profound it is we had continent-wide sedimentary rock deposits. So if you look at this, when you are on the rim of the Grand Canyon, hopefully when we go back this fall, this is the Coconino sandstone. It's about 300 feet thick of sandstone. By the way, if you like all the glass windows, those are the layers that are key for making all glass. Hundreds to thousands of feet of thickness. I mean, you got 7,000 feet of material just in Grand Canyon alone. Just to get that, it has to be so violent for that level scale. Massive scale. I can't even convey to you, and I hopefully may be able to show a short clip, but just think of the Franklin Mountains right now. When you walk outside to go wherever you're going to go afterwards, the height of the Franklin Mountains, they stick up about 2,500 feet. Just imagine that be a wall of water instead. That's how large scale. That's why I chose this background. That wave, imagine that wave being as tall as the Franklin Mountains coming at you. And water is the only mechanism to be able to do that. And then that's what leaves behind our limestone and our shale, which is all oceanic, by the way, again. And then the sandstone is continental, meaning stuff that was already on the continents, but you bring in all that water, it literally breaks down. And that coconino sandstone over there is actually erosion of the existing rocks, especially like the granite. Our nice granite over here, that's a source for sandstone. And the extensive fossils. And I'll just point out one part here. This whole rock, I nicknamed this my Megadeth rock, just like the band that I grew up with. But this is because it is full of dead seashells. They all died instantly and rapidly. That's the only way you can get. And when you get a chance later, all these little dark spots right here, those are clams. So if you like eating clams, well, you can try eating those. They're going to be a little crusty. Okay? But that's what we call a megadeath sequence, which is all part of really what the Noah's flood is revealing there. And so in the Franklin Mountains, again, you can see the parallels. Here's the flat layers. Red Bluff Granite, I pointed out. Notice the correlation between the Grand Canyon. Everyone likes to go to Grand Canyon because it is so grand, and I love it too. But we got it easier here. We got it better in some ways. So the wrath of judgment, mechanisms of catastrophe. And it came to pass, actually I can read it from up there so it doesn't block. And it came to pass after 7 days that the waters of the flood were on the earth. On that day, all the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were open. Genesis 7. So pretty much everyone right off the bat remembers, 40 days of rain. Yeah, that's true. That's great. First ever rain, by the way. There was no rain prior to that. But those were minor relative to the fountains of the deep. So prior to rain, it was always mist, rivers, and groundwater. But the violent earthquakes were required to literally pull apart the earth's crust and open up the fountains of the deep. And I'm sure some of you are familiar with Old Faithful geyser like at Yellowstone. It comes off like every 90 minutes. I've been there when it's happened. But imagine hundreds of foot, maybe thousands of foot tall, and thousands of miles long. We'll get into that here. And then massive tsunamis, basically just covering the whole continent. Imagine sitting here right now, and then those Franklin Mountains of water, imagine what would happen to us. That was happening in a matter of minutes and hours apart from each other, all across the world for 150 days. Not just 40 days, 150 days. And then, of course, rapid continental tectonic movement. If any of you live near the train tracks, or ever have, just imagine that. You can feel the rumble of the train, and they're moving slow. They're creeping along. Okay? Now imagine what they're like at full speed. That's how quickly all the land was moving. And that's why the Sierra Nevadas are in the position that they are in right now. I like to use the analogy of your fingernails. Every time you trim your fingernails, that's the average rate everything's moving now. San Andreas system, Southern California, where my brother lives, it's actually much faster. Any day now is going to be, I don't know how much longer we're going to have an LA basin area. Okay. Luckily, it's not going into the ocean. It's just going towards Alaska. It may suddenly end up in Alaska if anything comes back to life at the rate we were going. So when we try to run, for those of us that can still run, you can maybe cover 2 or 3 meters in one step. Okay. So the continents were moving meters per second, as fast as a runaway train. And that's what broke up the original continent. And this is where the Bible and the secular world completely agree. What's called the Pangea supercontinent. Everyone's on the same page with that. But they claim that it creepily broke apart at the rate our fingernails grow, like now, because they say the present is the key to the past. But the Bible makes it real clear the past is the key to the present. It's the foundation of everything. So I like to use the analogy also, just think of a bumper car ride. Everything's smashing together and then pulling apart, just like a bumper car ride. If you go to Western Playland, I used to do that. And there were no mountains prior anyways. It was just rolling hills, kind of like Kansas. From just dull rolling hills, nothing special, no grand sights. And the proof of this sudden, rapid separation is here in these dark zones right here. These are called mid-ocean ridges. These are the scars, which are still active today, by the way. This is where everything's still separating. And to see this in cross-section, which is right here, this is where new oceanic crust is slowly forming. But in the days of Noah, this was happening on a rapid scale. And the whole western U.S., here's an example. This is what formed all of our western mountain range, especially the Rocky Mountains. Joel and Cindy from Colorado, they were living there. That whole Front Range area is a consequence of what we call rapid subduction. These oceanic crusts thrusting into the ground. And here's an example, proof of that. This is from Cristo Rey, just show more a while later, that the lines, I marked some of the lines with purple. This is what we call a fault plane, where it scrapes. So a good analogy for that, those of us that tried skateboarding, and it didn't go well, your skin would look like that sometimes afterwards. Okay? This is called a slick and slide. I like to call it slick and slide, like what would happen when I'd fall off a skateboard or my bike, or what I do all the time. So the rocks give us the evidence, the hard proof. We just got to learn their languages. I'm trying to teach you today. And you got these large scale tectonics. This is what brought me into geology, was the large scale. And here's an exaggerated map to show you how that subduction all along the west coast of North America formed all the western mountain ranges, which, by the way, are key to our current water supply, which I'll get into later. But then we have the whole Midwest area, key for agriculture. And then I forget the names of which mountains these are, some of the Ozarks and stuff, but then we have the Appalachians over here. So on both ends of the continent, all these mountains are a result of clashing continents. But it's because cleansing, if it wasn't for that cleansing, we wouldn't have any of these features. And so to put in El Paso perspective again, here's the Sierra de Juarez Mountains over here off to the left. They were pushed from about 40 miles from over here, smashed into the Franklin Mountains right here. And then, since then, everything's been stretched apart. It's like the accordion effect, as I like to call it. So the Mesilla Basin, which you see the river valley, there's Cañutillo, Santa Teresa. If it wasn't for that basin, we wouldn't have a river to flow through. And if we didn't have the Rocky Mountains that got all the snow in the wintertime, there would be no water from the snowmelt to flow through. And like where Joel and Cindy live, right there in the river basin, just don't want to get too much of a good thing sometimes. But you have access to the groundwater there for all your agricultural and gardening needs. On this side, though, is the Hueco Bolson. That's another key source for water. If it wasn't for the stretching, we would not have a river or groundwater. We wouldn't have any of these basins. And I'll get into some of the quick details of that as we get towards the end here. And so, that picture of the Sierra de Juarez, did any of you see what I saw? Did any of you see the sideways leaning taco in the previous picture? Well, if he didn't. So that's basically, if I take my hand and curve it back over, that's what's called a recumbent fold. Just like taking your tortilla and flipping it over onto its side. The amount of force, though, and you can see that from I-10. If you're driving to I-10 west, those of you from the west side coming here, you'll miss it completely. But if you're going back, especially before 2 o'clock, after 2 o'clock, and this time of year is not so bad because the sun angle's higher, but in the cooler months, you won't be able to see it after 2 o'clock. But imagine thousands of trains moving at a high rate of speed and then slamming into a wall. That's essentially why this formed. So if you don't grasp the level of wrath that Yahweh can impose on us, you can go see it. And how perfect is it that it says right here, Biblia Lila, right? Read the Bible. I should have followed that a long time ago. Saved me a lot of suffering. He was still literally, he was telling me, look, right there. You don't get it. Now you do. Fear him. That's an example of why we should fear the Lord. He tells us, he's showing us right there. So real quick, when it comes to rapid erosion and filling for these, just the Franklin Mountains are only 6,000 feet up from sea level, 2,500 feet above the valleys. But that's what? They used to be almost 30,000 feet, like Mount Everest. How's that possible? Wouldn't that be amazing, having Mount Everest in your backyard? Oh, that would be a lot of cool stuff, a lot of cool hiking. Well, it's because it all washed away as the flood waters receded, and it filled all of our basins nearby. All that material is in Mesilla and Waco Bosong. And here the Mesilla, where the Rio Grande flows, is up to 12,000 feet deep. It's our key water source, especially right now, this time of year. But it keeps getting less and less each year. And then the Waco Basin, right here, right where Beaumont is, where's Trans Mountain? There it is. Right here where Beaumont covers over here is the deepest part, 9,000 feet. Well, good thing they built a new hospital because they were right on a fault line. Imagine going to the hospital, get a special surgery, and then the big earthquake hits, which we're apparently overdue for. Yeah, that building would be a pile of rubble. But the new hospital is still sinking into the ground, so it's got its own issues. Okay, here's the most, I think, important part to grasp, though. So it's not all doom and gloom. It's not all wrath. But just like he had to break me, shatter me into pieces to break me in my pride and my blindness, he has mercy. And just like our Nehemiah devotional, he'll restore. We just got to wait on him and trust him. And look at all that he provides. If it wasn't for all that catastrophe, we wouldn't have water through the Rio Grande, from the Rocky Mountain snowmelt, much less the Waco Basin to capture it and store it during the dry months. We wouldn't have any of those agricultural soils all across the Midwest, which is the farming capital, the breadbasket of the world. We wouldn't have all the structural needs, all the concrete infrastructure for all our roadways and buildings, much less all of our signature rock walls. When the TV show Cops used to always play, I always knew when they were in El Paso, because they're the only place with the rock walls, because we have quarries everywhere. And that's all the limestone, especially this rock right here. This is a nice big chunk of limestone. That's perfect for concrete walls. They put it in concrete, they pulverize it into powder, and then the pieces they don't break up, they can make the walls. But most importantly in our modern world, energy, worldwide Oil deposits. Well, what's been going on since February 28th? The world's in shambles. What are gas prices? Because we're so dependent on it. But we wouldn't have any of it. And actually, I see on the news reports, I see all the oil structure features just from watching the news, and folds just like we have in Sierra de Juarez. I can see those during the news reports, and they're talking about something completely different. And coal deposit. Now, coal's been stigmatized really bad, but it's actually all organic. What happened to the organic movement, by the way? It's literally all organic because they want to deceive us. They want us to think that the world is destroying itself and that we're the biggest culprit. Well, that's a whole nother side argument, because the dinosaurs themselves was when carbon was at the highest concentration it's ever been, and the plants were the biggest, the animals were the biggest, the people were the biggest. They were living for hundreds of years. Noah, look how long he lived. If we had so much carbon in the atmosphere, why was it so bad? And then, of course, materials. Plastics for our modern world, the shale rock oil, which is dominant in the Permian Basin, and then all our glass products, the windows. By the way, every one of these cinder blocks is made from concrete, limestone. Every one of your chairs has metal in it, just like from the granite, and many more. I'm just barely scratching the surface. But this is the most important part. Salvation. And Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. John 14:6. I get to share that all the time in random moments. I even had 2 Mormons appear to me in the middle of the wilderness in our property in Ruidoso. And I asked them, what do you think is the most profound scripture of all? If you could only pick one, which would you pick? And they gave me a good one from Matthew. That's the one I chose. Trust him. And he provides. And even if he doesn't fix your body, don't worry. You get to go home and be with him. You get a new body soon. I never imagined that I could stand up here and share this with y'all, but much less be able to walk up and down those steps. It took me 2 years to be able to walk up and down those steps. Just trust him and let him lead you. In Jesus' mighty name. We went on a little long, so I will spare any videos other than if you really want to put it all in a better perspective. This is more focused on the local. But if you want to really put it all together, the global part, I recommend The Ark in the Darkness. That changed my whole perspective 2.5 years ago. And then, I don't know, do you want to play it? Just a little short bit, just to show you the scale.
The Bible tells us that God looked upon his creation, and behold, it was all corrupted. For all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. Judgment day had finally come.
There you go. There's the wall of water. Right there. All right, that's a good place to stop, I think, right there. That's your teaser. Whether YouTube, that's on YouTube, or Amazon, go check out that one first. And then if you want to get more into the weeds, into the rocks, then there's Genesis history, gets even deeper into the layers. So I hope at least some of this makes sense from you, but you grasp both his grandness, but his judgment, but his mercy and his salvation. Thank you.